Good afternoon, everyone. Healthcare is probably one of the biggest challenges of the century. So my topic is machine augmented healthcare for all. So there are three aspects to my talk: machines, healthcare, and the world population. It's always a good idea to start with a great quote. So here's one. Economy grows as more and more people join as a core economics. People are the most important economic resources at all times. Any guesses on who said that? All your guesses would be wrong because it's my own quote. It's after lunchtime, so I thought I'd get your attention. Now that I have your attention, let's delve into the topic. So here's the agenda. So we'll see why healthcare is really such a big challenge. Challenge in itself is a motivation and opportunity is other. So we are going to examine the problem from both angles. Recently, I think you might have read in the news that a team from Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, won a $1 million prize, called the Fulbright from Bill Clinton Foundation, for a dot-in-the-box project. It's basically a diagnostic kit which helps for helping with the chronic disease management in the slums. So that is the kind of opportunity that we are looking at. And as Dr. Salman mentioned, mHealth is like a gateway to these kind of opportunities. So we'll then get to the root of what constitutes good health and envision how machines can help with that function. We'll examine one particular aspect of the whole gamut, which is medical diagnosis in a little bit of detail. The road to accomplishments is always marked by formidable challenges, so we are going to look at the challenges in accomplishing our vision. And then we'll conclude with the future directions. So here are some of the questions for you to ponder about during and after the talk as well. The purpose of my talk is essentially to initiate you into these topics. So some of the questions are, how is mHealth related to the various other technologies in vogue today? And how can we provide healthcare to the millions who don't have access to healthcare? And can machines replace doctor eventually? And as I mentioned, opportunities and challenges in the mHealth space, mobile health space, is something that we should ponder about. And finally, can machines help in curing diseases at a molecular level, at the gene level? So the healthcare challenge can be summed up in this distorted map. The territory size shows the proportion of the doctors that work in that territory. So if you observe it carefully, there's no Africa. There's almost no Africa. So that's because there are hardly any physicians or doctors who work in Africa. So it's a major challenge. Another surprising fact is that Australia and Canada are also very distorted. You hardly see them. And they are developed nations. So you might be wondering why. That's because of the sparse population. The population is so sparse that the number of doctors is very few. And then this is compounded, this whole issue is compounded by people traveling all over the world and spreading epidemics. Pandemics and disasters will only increase because people travel. As I indicated in the first slide, people are indeed the key to advancement of the world. Reaching out to the masses is very important for a sustained growth. So there is an economic angle to the humanitarian aspects. We want to get everyone into the fold so that we serve them and we get served by them. Overall, the economy of the world boosts. There's actually more to what's in the map. So statistics indicate that 60% of India doesn't have basic medical facilities. And those who do have access they have to travel more than 30 kilometers for a health facility. But still, India is showing a good shape there. That is because that map is based on territory and not on population density. India, the population density is much, much more than the other places. So it's a significant challenge which the world is not able to cope up with. And researchers are motivated by challenges. So for the last 25 years, there is a conference called DX, which focuses solely on the problem of medical diagnosis. DX stands for diagnosis. So it has been organized for the last 25 years, every year, and still the problem is unsolved. We still don't have an completely automated solution for medical diagnosis. And fortunately, now things have changed. We have mobile devices. Mobile is what the World Wide Web was in the 90s. It is helping to take technology to the people. In the 90s, early 90s, the World Wide Web it greatly helped in taking things to the people. We could get technology cover the masses. So the same thing is happening because of the mobile devices now. And then do-it-yourself, DIY as it is called, is in vogue today. People are trying to do a lot of things by themselves. And diagnosis is not an exception. Medical diagnosis as well has taken this route of do-it-yourself. For instance, if someone is suffering from a unique problem, the first thing that one would do is to look up the internet and see if it could help in finding out what the problem is. So self-diagnosis, that's called as self-diagnosis, and that's becoming quite common. So the technology has come of age, information retrieval technology has come of age, where diagnosis could possibly be attempted using those techniques. It is said that the wearables market will be $5 billion market in a couple of years. By 2016, the market of wearables, that is devices which can be worn on the body, it's going to be a $5 billion market. And then, thanks to the wireless networks, we now almost have universal internet access because of the wireless networks. So these are some of the enabling factors and motivation for getting into this. So there's a company called Gartner, I'm pretty sure you would have heard about it, which comes up with lots of reports. So this is one of the reports they came up with. It's called the Hype Cycle. This is for 2014. Every technology passes through various phases. So first there is innovation triggers. Then people start having lots and lots of expectations from the technology that it will solve a lot of things. Then slowly that expectations fall down. People come to the reality. That's what is called the trough of disillusionment. And then once we pass through the disillusionment, we go to enlightenment. And then finally, it's the cruising area, so the plateau of productivity. So there's not much of development happening, and we just use whatever is available, and people are happy. A lot of productivity happens there. So currently, you see, the mHealth aspect, mobile health aspect is somewhere here. So it's in the trough of disillusionment. So, and it's likely to reach the plateau of productivity in like 5 to 10 years. So we should all help taking it to the plateau of productivity in the next 5 to 10 years. So, as I mentioned, mobility is key these days. That's the technology which is able to take solutions to the people. It's the same that the World Wide Web did in the 90s. So, there's a small personal sharing here. When I graduated from Osmania in '89, that first batch, I created an alias for my classmates called ECSE 89 at taichi.informix.com. Taichi was my machine, informix.com was the company where I was working. So anyone could send a mail to that alias and it would go out to everyone. So that was so personalized to our domain. The same idea, someone took it to the web, to the World Wide Web, and made it available to everyone. And that became a company. Anyone knows the name of the company? It's called eGroups. So that company got sold to Yahoo for about $1 billion. So I just missed the billion because I did not take my solution to the masses. So taking the solution to the masses is really very important, and mobile is the key to take solutions to the masses. Similarly, this idea of Twitter. I'm a fan of expressing things in as few words as possible. That's why all these quotations. So the same idea Twitter implemented, took it to the masses, and now it's a world power. Someone says on Twitter, it becomes a big news. So the key is to take solutions to the masses. It's not enough to have ideas, but take solutions to the masses. And mobility is what helps us. So as you can see, these figures are all in millions. And as you can see, there are just 11 million hospital beds for the entire population of the developing world. Whereas we have 2,293 million mobile phones. So that's the reach of mobility these days. And mobility empowers people. For instance, we have a museum in San Jose called Tech Museum. They gave me a set of wearables that I could put on my head, and then they gave me a device which looked like a mobile phone. So the wearables got connected to the mobile phone. They asked me to roam around and go to the exhibits. And when I came back after a few hours, I just put the phone on a big display, and it told me my feelings at each of those exhibits. Whether I was excited, whether I was intrigued, so things like that. It was pretty cool. So that's the kind of things we can achieve with mobility and the wearables and so on. So as I mentioned, mobile health is like a gateway to all these opportunities in the healthcare industry. Why such a push to mobile health? So these days, previously the problem was that of communicable diseases, like tuberculosis and so on. These days, it's more that shift has happened towards chronic diseases. So diabetes, blood pressure, these are the killers these days, more than tuberculosis and other communicable diseases. So the World Health Organization, which is the premier body for health, and the ITU, International Telecommunications Union, which is the premier body for mobile instruments. So both of them came together and thought about this problem of chronic diseases and started pushing for mobile health. So they came up with a 4-year program where they would promote use of mobile devices for healthcare. They identified a few developing countries, out of which India is pretty prominent. And then they took all these programs to these countries. They envisaged a lot of applications, ranging from patient monitoring, appointment reminders, education, particularly pregnant women. Statistics indicate that the mortality rate for pregnant women in India is pretty high. So there's a program, I don't remember the name of the program, in India, where they send out messages, SMS, every week, I believe, educating the pregnant women about pregnancy issues. So that's one such program. There are several such programs in different countries which are pretty successful. And then other important application is that of telemedicine. So telemedicine is basically consultation between the health professionals and patients using various means like text, data, imaging, or video functions using a mobile device. So that's also pretty big. And then of course we have this new trend where you can attach devices, you can plug devices to your mobile phone, and it would do a lot of stuff like ultrasound, mostly for pregnancy. There's a company called Mobisante in San Jose, which is trying to propagate this idea of universal ultrasound everywhere. So basically, I have the links. If you have time, you can go look at those websites as well. So the idea is basically to plug an ultrasound device to the mobile phone and do ultrasound. So, so things like that. Then there is a cell scope attached that can be attached to the iPhone to check the eardrums. And like today morning's keynote mentioned about how the camera resolution is helping with some applications. The camera resolution of a mobile device is actually growing at a Moore's law, like processor's speed. So that's the kind of developments happening with camera resolution. So with those developments, cell phone microscopy is becoming a trend these days. So you can actually use cell phone as a microscope, right? And so there are many such applications. If you Google up, you'll be able to find many such applications. The Indian healthcare industry alone is worth $79 billion US, and it is expected to grow to $280 billion by 2020. So that is the kind of growth we are looking at, and we don't have the people resources to manage this kind of demand. So now let's switch gears and look at what exactly is health. So there are a lot of studies which have confirmed the positive correlation between mindfulness and health-related quality of life. So mindfulness is basically monitoring the most taken for granted physiological processes like heartbeat, breath, and thereby regulating the life forces within. So Harvard has conducted a lot of studies in this field, and they have confirmed that mindfulness helps even in controlling the heart rate. So that's the power of the mind. We would have all read in the books, in the ancient scriptures as well, that sages could control physiological processes within themselves. They could diagnose and even cure, all based in the mind. And it has proved in some other studies, repeated studies, that cancer is basically a disturbed homeostasis. So it's basically an imbalance in the mind. So the key to health is really in the mind. And machines have demonstrated that they can take on a lot of functions of the mind, like reasoning, computing, and thinking, playing chess, for instance, and so on. So why not mindfulness? This is a life-supporting issue. Why not the machines help in this activity as well? So that is the goal of my research. So if you look at the current state of affairs, most of the stuff is already there. We have a lot of solutions. So medical diagnosis is, at least to some extent, medical diagnosis is already possible. There have been solutions since the 1970s where medical diagnosis could be done used by machines. And then curing at the molecular level by way of gene therapy is also possible. And using variables to constantly monitor the person's health by taking the ECGs or measuring the blood sugar. So those kind of things are already, that technology is also there. So of course we cannot completely replace the mind, but we have been successful in replicating at least some of its functionality. So given all these pieces of the puzzle, so we just unfold our vision, putting all these pieces together. And so this is the vision. So how can we leverage mobile health using the various technologies that were identified in the Gartner cycle? And then help machines take on the function of the mind. So mobile alone can't do things. It has to come together with other technologies, and this is what I'm sure you would have heard about this acronym called SMART. Anyone know the full form? That is the trend. SMART is the trend: social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. So those are the trendy topics in this area. So, like Dr. Salman mentioned, the advent of wearable technologies, we can do a lot of things like measure the blood sugar and things like that. So, so the patient would have all these variables on his body, and he would the vitals like blood pressure and even ECG, whatever, those would be sent to the cloud, the computing power in the cloud, using a mobile device. A lightweight protocol like Bluetooth would help transmit information between the wearables and the mobile device. And of course, we have Wi-Fi and LTE, 3G, 4G to transmit to the cloud from a mobile device. So once all this information is in the cloud, you can do a lot of stuff there because there's a lot of computing power in the cloud. So in this instance, I'm sure I'm talking only about the diagnosis, but there's a lot more that can be done. For instance, like Dr. Salman mentioned, if the sugar level, if the variables indicate that the sugar level is going down, that information can be combined with other parameters from the variables, and then there could be a diagnosis saying that increase the or send an SMS that the person has to eat something to bring up the sugar levels. So stuff like that. That's a very simple application, but if you look at some other complicated things like suppose a person is having palpitations where the heart, instead of beating, it starts vibrating. So those kind of things need a lot more processing, and that kind of decision support can happen in the cloud. So just for focus, we'll focus more on the medical diagnosis part, which has been a problem that has been researched for several decades. In fact, when I was doing my final project in engineering, my project was an expert system. I had to do what my guide, Professor Sami Fatima, gave me. So I opted for something else, a different domain. But those days, the medical domain, expert systems for the medical domain were very popular. And one such expert system is called MySim. So it had 600 rules. Expert systems those days were basically written in a language called Prolog or some other first order logic kind of language. And it had a lot of rules. There was a rule base and then there was an inference engine and so on. So this MySim had just 600 rules. And it actually performed much better than the medical experts. Its domain was very, very limited. It was focused only on blood-related diseases, but also clotting-related diseases, a very small subset. And it actually outperformed the experts in that domain. So now we have far, far better infrastructure. So it was just 600 rules then, but now the solution that I'm proposing in this presentation uses representation in a vector space of thousands of dimensions. So we have the computing power to do all that. So the conventional programming paradigm was to generalize from small data. So we had 600 rules and then we were generalizing stuff. But the current trend is to personalize from big data. So you have a huge lot of data, and then you pick what is apt to a particular person. So that's the paradigm shift there. And then human body is a great source of data, big data. Take for instance the gene sequence. It's a huge data that can be processed, and we can do a lot of stuff with that data. So there are a lot of solutions focused on this problem of medical diagnosis. So the original was first order logic based stuff. Even that is continuing even today. Not using Prolog, but there's something called semantic web, RDF and semantic web. I'm sure quite a few of you would be knowing. So we are using semantic web to come up with this diagnosis. So what is done is there is an ontology for diseases. There is a standard ontology for disease called DOID, D-O-I-D, and there is a standard ontology for symptoms called SIM. So basically it's a matching game between these two ontologies, match the symptoms to the disease. So that is one approach that the researchers are taking. The other approach is based on machine learning, feature extraction and classification. We saw some such solutions in the morning's keynote today. So things like that. But none of the solutions so far are general purpose and suited for for mass deployment. Each solution is limited to a particular domain of disease. So, but that's too expensive. That's still expensive. It is relatively inexpensive compared to the human expertise, but it is still expensive. We want a solution which is applicable to everyone. So these are the guidelines to come up with a solution which caters to the needs of everyone. So one thing we should keep in mind is, for a wider impact, we should always embrace the KISS methodology, right? Keep it simple. So we don't want to do interviews like we used to do for expert systems. We had to interview experts, do knowledge engineering and all that stuff. So we don't want to do all that. We want to build a solution which uses the available information. We don't want to get new information. So that's the first requirement. Then the second requirement is it should be general, inexpensive, and adequate enough to cover the masses. Right? And we don't want to wait for new technologies to come up. We want to use whatever algorithms we have so far. And it should not require a lot of knowledge engineering and expert maintenance and so on. So these are the general guidelines for that. So the solution that I came up with is to use discharge sheets. This is a typical discharge sheet. It's very common in India, but it's not common in elsewhere. Like in US, this concept is not even there. So we are fortunate to have this because this captures the expertise of the doctor in a very precise manner. There is a diagnosis, there is a case summary listing all the symptoms, and then there is some treatment advice. So this basically captures the expertise of the doctor there. So he has gone through the symptoms and he has diagnosed it as that, allergic bronchitis with asthma. So that's a great source of expertise. So, so a novice would depend on book knowledge, but an expert would differentiate himself by using this kind of experience. And fortunately, we have that experience all encoded in these discharge sheets. So, we approached a non-profit in India who gave us some discharge sheets. And they promised that we'll come up with a solution, and we approached them. They gave us but very few discharge sheets, a few hundreds of them. But that's not really enough. For any big data kind of application, you would quickly realize that that is hardly anything. Hundreds is hardly anything. So what we did is there is a website, there's actually a document base created by the US government. It's accessible through a website called NIMH. It's a US government website, and you can actually download a lot of, it's not like discharge sheet, but they are case summaries. There's a lot of data there. So we downloaded like a few hundreds of thousands of such documents clubbed with these discharge sheets, and together formed a corpus of documents. So just to give a glimpse of the corpus of the discharge sheets, we created a word cloud. And the biggest thing that came out of all those discharges is neurosurgery. I don't know why that area, something specific must be happening in neurosurgery, but that was the biggest theme that came across through discharges. I'm sure you would be aware of this word cloud, right? In a word cloud, the size of the word indicates the frequency in the corpus. So words like tab standing for tablet and INJ standing for injection, those are also quite commonly used. So just to make sure that we are on the right track, so we did a lot of this kind of experiments, like clustering and doing k-means and stuff like that. And then the real solution. So text mining, I don't know how many of you know about text mining. If you already know, please pardon me. But text mining essentially is to mine for patterns in the text. Look for something which can be detected from the text. So the basic thing that we do is a little bit of pre-processing where we remove unwanted stuff. what are the unwanted stuff? Stop words. Stop words are like and, then, all those which don't really make much sense, much meaning. Stop words, numbers, punctuation, and things like that. And then what we do is like draw a caricature of the corpus. In a caricature, what we do is essentially identify the prominent features. For instance, for P.V. Narasimha Rao, the features would be maybe a prolonged mouth and a flattened nose or whatever. Or for George Bush, it's like big ears. Right? So, drawing a caricature. So we do the same thing for the corpus. We remove words which are very frequent and which are hardly used, and focus on the prominent ones. So any relationship between two entities depends on what the entity is and also what the other entity thinks about this entity, right? Between two people. So similarly, the relationship of a term, of a word to a document is also like this. There are two things: what the term really is and what the document thinks about the term. So for what the term is, it is term frequency, the number of times the term appears in the document. And for what the document thinks, it's the inverse document frequency. So if a word appears in many documents, then we downplay that word. So it's a combination of these two, TF and IDF. So the idea is to get this TF-IDF scores and then plot each of the documents in a vector space. So each of the documents basically becomes a vector. If you remember the vector algebra that we studied in intermediate, vectors are basically points, right? We can do a lot of stuff with these points. So we plot each of these documents in the vector space and label each of these vectors with the diagnosis on those documents. So each word is actually a dimension. So that way there are thousands of dimensions, because there will be thousands of words in the corpus. Each dimension would be a word, and the measure of each dimension is the TF-IDF score for that word. So using those measures, we plot the documents as vectors. And because it is very hard to visualize that in thousands of dimensions of space, we project it to this three-dimensional space. So this is like orthographic projection in your engineering drawing, right? So where 3D is projected as a 2D on the 2D plane and so on. So something similar, thousands of dimensions, we project it to these three dimensions. And then we can clearly see that there are two distinct categories of documents. One is the documents that we got from the US government's public domain. Those documents are mainly based on burns, diseases related to burns. And the other one is the discharge sheets. So when we did clustering, it could clearly identify the two clusters pretty correctly. So even though we did not look at the semantics of what is there in the documents, we were able to do this kind of meaningful things. So now how do we do diagnosis? So when a patient comes with the symptoms, maybe he would use the cell phone, his mobile phone and the variables to communicate the information, the required information for the symptoms that he's having. So we collect all those symptoms and basically make it a document of symptoms, plot it in the same vector space as the other document, discharge sheets. So now the symptoms of a patient is basically a vector in the vector space, in the same vector space. So the problem of diagnosis boils down to simply finding the closest vector in that vector space. So for instance, suppose the variables indicate that the SpO2 level is 91 with oxygen, and the person is going through some chest spasms, and there's some wheezing in the lungs, right? And the basic symptoms are that he is feeling breathlessness and coughing a lot. So when all this data is put in the vector space model, the closest discharge sheet that comes up is the one that we saw previously, where we said it's allergy. What is it? Allergy, asthma. Some medical term, asthma. So using vector space model, we identified that discharge sheet as the closest to the symptoms vector, and then say that the diagnosis is asthma. Right? So just to make it a little more robust, we also provide the diagnosis for the k nearest neighbors of that vector. We say that these are also possibilities for the diagnosis. And using all this information, we can also come up with documents to help with the decision support. Suppose if a medical expert is looking, a doctor is looking at all this information. So we would also prompt him with the documents that he can refer to further understand the issue. So that's essentially the solution. And the math behind this is pretty simple. See, it's a profound application, right? I mean, we are talking of impacting the whole world. And the math behind this is so simple. It's just the TF-IDF, computing the TF-IDF. TF is just the term frequency, the number of times the word appears in the document. And IDF is basically the number of words in the corpus divided by the document frequency for that term. Number of documents the term appears. So we penalize the term frequency by that term. And then the similarity or the proximity between two documents, two vectors, is basically the cosine similarity. If you remember intermediate vector algebra, this is the formula for cosine similarity. So that's it. That's the math behind all this. So what are the challenges? So the most important challenge is that this is such a sensitive application that if somebody hacks the system, it could be fatal. So Dr. Salman talked about the insulin, right? If somebody hacks that and if the variables pump a lot of insulin in the body, it could be fatal. The person could simply die if there is excess of insulin. So that's the biggest challenge. The system has to be perfectly secure. The other problem is that the mobile devices are just entering the market into some of the variables and some of the mobile applications like this ultrasound device plugged into the mobile phones. They're all just entering the market, and when some technology enters the market, they would like to capitalize first. They want to build some capital before taking it, before reducing the price. So that could jeopardize the penetration of the products, the variables, for underprivileged sections. So these devices may not go to the underprivileged sections so soon. So one solution to that is that there are a lot of philanthropic projects going on. Like Google launched this Loon project, where they want to provide internet to the whole world using balloons, right? It's such a simple concept. You just Google up and then you look at the pages that Google has put up. It's a beautiful concept, very workable concept. So things like that, if those come up, such philanthropic projects come up, maybe this problem might get solved. So in olden days, I mean even now for that matter, technology was taking data and information to the people. So you have internet, you have TV, which basically take information to the people. But these days, it's the data that is taking technology to the people. The body has a lot of data, so that data is basically helping us take technology to the people. Without the data, the technology is just useless. So such is the import of data, and that data is very difficult. Anyone familiar with machine learning would quickly reflect on this. Ground truth is very difficult in machine learning problems, and same here. So medical data is probably the most sensitive data that any person could have, and it cannot be compromised. In US, there is a law which prevents use of medical data pertaining to a person, even in anonymous ways, without his consent. So even to use somebody's medical data anonymously, the person has to sign it off. even for research purposes. So such is so tightly is the data guarded, medical data guarded in various countries. So data is a big problem, challenge. Then there is still a need for medical expertise. So it's like I'll have to rush a bit. And then another problem is the very high cost of type 1 and type 2 errors. So if there are any false positives or true negatives, the cost is really very high. So that's the other challenge. So some of the future directions, and they're still in very initial stages. What we are able to say, it's still hardly, they are hardly there to take it to any meaningful usage. So for us to take it to commercialize it probably, or take it to the masses, first thing is simple text is not enough. Spoken word is not enough to gather the symptoms. We need images, video, audio, and as many means as possible to get information. And the other thing is big data. There is no concept of state in big data. If you look at all these big data applications, stateful big data doesn't exist at all. But most of the applications do require state. For instance, if my BP is low now, it means nothing. It has to be related to the previous readings. So if my BP has been low for say 10 days, then it constitutes hypertension. So there is this requirement for including a state with the big data, so particularly for medical domain. So that's an area that needs to be researched. Then aggregating health data to predict epidemics and health trends. That's one area which really needs to come up. Then of course these kind of applications need natural language. There are innumerable number of languages in the world and many people don't know many other languages. So NLP and IVR play a big role here. And then of course the big problem after diagnosis is curing. And that's a major area that needs to be covered as well. So in conclusion, the biggest message that I want to give to most of the students here is to push the envelope. Think really bold. I mean, who would think that a bag of words approach would work for medical diagnosis, such a serious application, right? So just think bold. And then revisit the ideas that were there in the 1970s, the olden days ideas. Because those days, those ideas were discarded because of lack of technology and lack of so many things. Now we have the technology, we have the infrastructure to do it. So do look at some of the old ideas. In fact, if you look now, lot of old ideas are coming up. It's like old wine in new bottle. This cloud computing thing is really a very old idea. When I joined Osmania, we were given a table. I still remember, Professor Vittal gave us a class and we were handed out sheets which had not sheets, actually a lab book, I think, which had a list of number of hours and prices charged. So that's basically cloud computing, right? So we are reinventing things in new ways, right? So do think about those old ideas and try to bring them up. And then don't forget mobile. That's the way to take solutions to the masses. So mobility is the way to go. And most importantly, you can be a grand winner too in this whole thing. So this is the team from Hyderabad Indian School of Business, which won the $1 million prize for the dot-in-the-box concept for solving the chronic diseases syndrome in slums. And even more importantly, a great quote again. Math is the heart of the matter. Once expressed in math, the matter dissolves and heals. Just like when you touch a person's heart, it dissolves and heals. And no prizes for guessing who said it this time. So these are the questions we started with. Hope you got answers to at least some of them, and hope you will continue to ponder about these points even after this talk. I'm almost out of time. I have all these resources, but you could always contact me. These are my contacts. You can always contact me, and we can exchange information on this. I can take a few questions now. I hope we have time for questions.
Yeah.
Do we have to wait for standardization to implement such systems, and are there standards available for medical domain?
Right now, standards is a big thing. We are not there yet at all. We are nowhere near standardization in this aspect. There are regulatory bodies, so it's a long way to go to the standards things. So right now we are still in the idea stage, very beginning.
What is this HIPAA about? HIPAA is one of the standards, I think.
HIPAA standard is for information. Oh, you're talking about the accessibility of information?
Right.
Oh yeah, for that there are a lot of laws. HIPAA is one of those laws which safeguards the information of patients. But to use this kind of system in reality, it's not easy. It has to go through a lot of checking before it can really become commercial. There is something called FDA in USA, which needs to endorse this for it to become applicable to it, because the cost of errors is really very high. You mean you like those laws to come here, or?
Because we do not have such things.
Yeah, that's right.
Because these days it is displayed on the even buses that I was suffering from this and I got queue.
Yeah, in fact, I was surprised that the discharge sheets, I removed the information from discharge sheets, but the discharge sheets contained almost everything about the patient. The age, the place, even the address, everything about the patient. I was really amazed that how could somebody give up such precious information. I am in US, I am from Indian origin, that's fine, but somebody else could be, they could think very differently about the whole scenario. Yeah, definitely it needs to be taken up with the government.
The Clintons, HIPAA Act they wanted to have. HIPAA.
Yes, HIPAA.
What happened? It dropped?
No, it is there. That act is still there. He introduced it, that's right, but that's still there. It has many provisions. It's not just about information, but there are many provisions. It is basically a patient's privileges. It has ensured that the rights of the patients are protected in many ways, not just information, but continuity of coverage and so on. There are a lot of stuff there. Any other questions?
Yeah, any more questions?
This project is done by Cisco or what's?
Research, I think.
So I have two lives actually, many lives.
Okay.
So two of the prominent lives are my company life and then my research life. I keep them totally separate because there are a lot of legal issues. If I do something similar, and I would not have been able to present if this was Cisco work. That is. So I keep my research completely different from my Cisco. Yeah. So this is my academic research.
Hello, did you enter yoga aspects into the research side? Yoga aspects, yoga specifics. Yoga.
Yeah. In what sense?
Will you solve this?
Yeah, that is the angle that I started with. In fact, some of the studies, if you look at my external abstract in the proceedings, I listed some of those yoga texts also in the references. So some of the findings that I had in these slides are from the yoga texts also.
if there are no questions, let us thank Vishnu Bediala. Of course, just let me conclude this stating that of course he has taken the stage in a very good way. And of course he said, how to diagnose the diseases. And in fact, I would like to work with him because I am thinking about a solution. And let me share it because sir also raised about the issue related to yoga. We are actually working with how to get this natural cures to be done. So he has done the one part, so where we can provide a natural cure, and we can develop an expert system. He started very well stating that people are the most economic resources. I liked it very well. And of course, a bit surprised when I came to know that developed nations has less physicians because of the sparse population, specifically in ancient Australia and Africa. And I thought, we are quite better. But of course, that is very much right that we don't have a total automated solution. And of course, I appreciate, and of course, because a lot of people sitting here, they should take this point very seriously, that we have to take the solutions to the masses. And of course, there's a big problem with India. It's my research, it's my shirt, it's my thing. Like we not share with everyone. And then of course, he lost billions of dollars. And of course, we do not know how many we used for that. And he also discussed about the name health, where use of mobile devices for healthcare, the project of WHO and ITU. Then of course, rightly pointed out that molecular level cure is what is needed. And of course, the age of SMAC. And of course, he has given a very good state of art starting from mycin. And of course, I like that because the 600 rules mycin application is even I was also very much interested at the time. And of course, finally, he went that stating that existing solutions are domain specific. Yes, I agree. Because we do not, that's just we talk about heuristics today. We have a specific solution, only for the specific rules. Of course, discharge sheet, I was very much worried, just wanted to add one more point to that. I was more surprised when I saw the information today on the RTC buses. I was suffering from this disease. It got cured. I don't have anything. My name is so-and-so. My patient ID is so-and-so. Since HIPAA is not practiced in our country, this information is open now, not even on those sites, but on the RTC buses. I think people have seen it. And of course, the good, there is pointers were given where we can download some summaries from NIMHs. And of course, the work what he presented with the word count, of course, is really appreciable, where it takes mining from the corpus to identify the diseases. Finally, he very much pointed out the challenges, and of course, the floor is open when we can take these challenges and of course go ahead. And I think this is the right platform. Why? Because we are exactly before a mobile computing track, which is to be started. So I thank you again once again. And of course, now I request Professor Ramchandran sir, Vice Principal, University College of Engineering, to felicitate Vishnu Bediala with the award.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you. Over to Dr. Shah.
Thank you, sir, for such a great. And request Professor Samir Fatima ma'am to present a memento to Dr. Salman Moiz, who is spending his time here. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So now the poster session has been started. All of you can just go around the poster sessions. And after that, till break, 4 to 6 session, our technical session will be started. Thank you.